I was walking past that old sidewalk I poured back in 1998 this morning, and it actually smiled back at me. No cracks, no heaving, just sitting there like a stubborn old turtle in the sun. It's a rare feeling in this life when you make something that might actually outlast your own mistakes.
Wait, are you telling me you actually have a project that didn't involve a frantic Saturday afternoon trip to the hardware store for emergency repairs? That's the real headline here.
Hey, I've had my share of mud wrestling matches with the mixer, don't you worry. But that's the thing about concrete. It's intimidating because it feels so permanent, like you're signing a contract with the earth itself. But once you understand the rhythm of it, it's really just a recipe, a heavy, dusty, back-breaking recipe.
It's the backbreaking part that usually keeps people like me at a distance. It feels like a trade secrets club. But we've been getting a ton of questions about small slabs, shed foundations, and walkways. So, today, we're peeling back the curtain. If someone wants to tackle their first pour, where does the real work actually begin? Because it's not when the truck shows up, is it?
If you start thinking about the project when the truck arrives, you've already lost the war. The secret, and I mean the absolute gospel of masonry, is that the concrete is just the frosting, the cake is the hole you dig before it even gets there. Most folks think you just scrape the grass off and start dumping bags. But if you want that slab to stay put, you've got to treat the ground like a structural element. You're looking at ground prep. You need to clear out the organic stuff, the roots, the topsoil, the things that rot and shift. Then you have to separate your sub-base from your base material.
Separation. Sounds like a messy divorce for rocks. What are we actually putting down there?
You want a solid gravel base, Alex, usually 4 to 6 inches. And here's the bit that gets skipped. You need a plate compactor. Rent one. It's this angry, vibrating metal beast that hums at a frequency that'll rattle your teeth loose, but it packs that gravel down until it's like a highway. If you skip the compaction, your concrete will eventually find its own way down into the voids, and that's when you get those ugly zigzag cracks.
Okay, so we've got a hole filled with very angry, very flat gravel. Now we have to actually contain the beast. I see people using 2x4s for forms all the time. Is it really as simple as just nailing some boards together?
It's simple, but it's high stakes. Think of your forms as the mold for a giant popsicle. If that mold is flimsy, your popsicle is going to be wonky. I like to use straight 2x4s or 2x6s held in place with stakes every 2 feet. And don't just tap them in, sledgehammer them down. When that wet concrete hits the forms, it's pushing with a lot of weight. I've seen forms blow out where the wood just gives up the ghost, and suddenly you're chasing a river of gray sludge across your lawn.
I can see you out there with a shovel, frantic, trying to scoop up a driveway that's escaping. But let's talk about the tilt. I read something about slope. How do we stop a new patio from turning into a backyard swimming pool every time it rains?
That's the pitch. It's the difference between a dry basement and a swamp. You want about a 1/4 inch of drop for every foot of distance. If you're pouring a 10-foot patio out from your house, the far end needs to be 2.5 inches lower than the house side. I use a string line and a line level to dial that in. It looks level to the eye, but the water knows the difference.
So we've got the hole, the gravel, and the wooden box. Now, the shiny stuff, rebar or mesh. I feel like people argue about this more than politics in shop circles.
It's the eternal debate. Look, for a small sidewalk, wire mesh is usually plenty. But for a driveway or a shed pad that's going to hold some weight, I'm a rebar man. It's the skeleton. Without it, concrete has great squish strength but terrible pull strength. You want to tie those bars together with wire into a grid, and here's the kicker. Use chairs or little rocks to prop the rebar up. If the rebar is just laying on the gravel at the bottom, it's doing absolutely nothing. It needs to be suspended right in the meaty center of the slab.
Okay, let's get to the part that actually scares people, the mix. If I'm not calling a giant barrel truck, I'm mixing it in a wheelbarrow or a bucket. How do I know I haven't made a giant batch of gray soup that'll never dry?
The soup trap is real. Beginner's instinct is to keep adding water because wet concrete is easier to move around. But water is the enemy of strength. Every extra cup of water you add beyond what's needed creates tiny voids when it evaporates, which weakens the final product. You're looking for the consistency of, well, thick oatmeal or peanut butter. If you pull a hoe through it and the ridge stays standing, you're in the ballpark.
And I've heard you mention that concrete is actually kind of mean to the person working it.
Oh, it's a chemical furnace, Alex. It's got lime in it, and it'll eat the oils right out of your skin. I've had cement burns that felt like I spent the day shaking hands with a radiator. Wear the rubber gloves. Wear the boots. If you get it in your eyes, the party's over. It's a material that demands a little respect for its chemistry.
So the mud is in the hole. We've poured it. Now we're in a race against the sun, right? You can't just walk away and have a sandwich.
The clock starts the second the water hits the powder. First, you screed. You take a long straight board and saw it back and forth across the top of the forms to level the mountain of mud. It's a workout. Your shoulders will remind you about it the next morning. After that, you hit it with a bull float. That's the big flat tool on a long pole. It pushes the large rocks down and brings the cream, that smooth paste, to the surface.
The Cream. That sounds like a 70s rock band, but that's what gives it that smooth, professional look?
Exactly. But don't get greedy. If you keep messing with it while there's bleed water sitting on top, that's the little puddles that rise up. You'll ruin the surface. You have to wait. There's a zen moment where the sheen disappears and the concrete starts to feel like stiff clay. That's when you get in there with your hand tools. You use an edger to give it those nice rounded corners so they don't chip off later, and a groover to put in control joints.
Control joints, is that like a therapist for the sidewalk?
Sort of. Concrete is going to crack. It's a fact of physics. A control joint is just you telling the concrete where you'd prefer it to crack. You're basically pre-breaking it in a straight line so it looks intentional.
What about that classic sidewalk texture? I've seen people use a literal broom. Is it really just a regular broom from the kitchen?
Well, don't use the one your spouse uses for the kitchen floor unless you want a very short conversation at dinner. But yes, a broom finish is the gold standard for DIY. Once the surface is firm enough that the broom doesn't sink in, you just pull it across. It gives you traction so you don't turn your driveway into an ice rink every time it drizzles.
So we've poured it, leveled it, textured it. Now we just let it sit? I've heard you're supposed to keep it wet while it cures? That seems backwards.
It's the most misunderstood part of the whole process. Concrete doesn't dry, it hydrates. It's a chemical reaction. If it dries out too fast because of the wind or the sun, it stops getting strong. I've been known to stay out there with a garden hose, lightly misting a new slab like I'm pampering a prize-winning fern. Or you cover it with plastic. You want to keep that moisture locked in for at least a few days. The slower it cures, the tougher it gets.
And the sealer? When do we put the raincoat on?
Give it a month. Let it finish its business. Then, a good penetrating sealer is worth its weight in gold. It keeps the salt and the freeze-thaw cycles from chewing up that beautiful finish you worked so hard for.
You know, hearing it all laid out, it sounds less like magic and more like a very heavy, very dusty ballet. It's all about timing and prep.
It really is. My first pour was a little pad for a trash can, and I didn't use a groover. I thought I knew better than the laws of expansion. 2 years later, it looked like a jigsaw puzzle that had been dropped from a plane. I learned more from that one 4x4 square of failure than I did from any manual.
But that's the beauty of it. Even your jigsaw puzzle trash pad was still a place to put the trash. You can always try again.
That's the takeaway for the folks listening. Don't let the permanence of the material paralyze you. If you're nervous, start small. Pour a couple of garden stepping stones in a bucket. Get a feel for how the mud moves, how it sets, and how it responds to a trowel. Once you realize you can control the cream, the fear of the slab just evaporates.
Just remember the rubber boots, unless you want to lose your skin along with your fear.
Good point. Boots first, then second.
Thanks for digging into the dirt with us today, Tiger. I think I might actually be brave enough to level out that spot by my back porch.
Just call me when you're ready to screed. I'll bring the coffee. Watch you do the heavy lifting.
Of course you will.